Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph. We'll be learning today Im Yirtzeh Hashem Daf Hey Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchas Hanagas Adam Ba'Boker. We pick up today on the bottom of Hey Amid Aleph, Siman Aleph. We have a few leftover Mishnah Berurahs over here on Sif Hey, and then we're going to continue with the Ramah on Sif Hey. Today's learning is Le'ilui Nishmas Avimayri Rabban Siba Meir, and also Le'ilui Nishmas Miriam Liba Bas Reb Aaron Aleha HaShalom. Okay, so we said yesterday in the Mechaber said, I'll just read the words of the Mechaber in Sif Hey. Tov Loimar, it is good to say Parsha Sa'akeda, the Parsha of Akedas Yitzchak, Parsha Samon, and the Parsha of the Mon from Parshas Beshalach, V'aseres hadibros and the Aseres hadibros, u'parshas Ola u'mincha u'shlamim v'chatos v'osham, as well as the parshias of the Torah that discuss the carbon Ola, the carbon mincha, the carbon shlamim, the carbon chatos, and the carbon osham. Now, we said that the reason we say the parsha of the Akedah is to remember and to mention the schus avos on a daily basis. We say the parsha Samon to remind people that parnassah is min hashamayim. We say the Aseres hadibros. We say the parsha of the Aseres hadibros so that we remind ourselves of Maimon Har Sinai on a daily basis, and then we say the parshas of the korbanos, the Ola, the Mincha, the Shlamim, the Chatos, and the Osham. So 3 lines from the bottom in the Mishnah Berurah. We were up to Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Yudalid. Says the Mishnah Berurah Ushlamim. We mentioned the parsha of the carbon Shlamim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, for Hu Hadin Parshas Toida. We should also recite the psukim that discuss the carbon Toida. Now the carbon Toida was also a type of carbon Shlamim. The word Toida means to thank. A carbon Toida is a carbon of thanksgiving. Like the Chazal tell us, Arba Tzrichim Lahodos. There are 4 that have an obligation to thank the Rabbeinu Shalom. Who are they? Yardei Hayam, somebody who travels by sea. Holchei Midbaros, somebody who goes through a journey through the Midbar. Chaylav and Isrape, somebody who was ill, and then the Rabbeinu Shalom gave him a refuah. And a Chavush Hayotzei Mibeisa Asurin, somebody who was a prisoner and he got out of prison. These are 4 people who they found themselves in very dangerous situations, and the Rabbeinu Shalom saved them from their danger. So now they are tzrichim lahodos. They have to give hoidah. They have to thank the Rabbeinu Shalom for their salvation, and the way they do that is by bringing a carbon toida. Says the Chavetz Chaim, when the Mechaber says that by davening you should mention the parsha of the Ola, the parsha of the Mincha, the parsha of the Shlamim, and the Chatas and the Osham, for who adin parshas toida. You should also recite the psukim of the Toida. The Gam hi b'chlal shlamim, because the carbon Toida is also a type of shlamim. V'achar ola u'shlamim v'toida. After we mention the psukim of the carbon ola, the carbon shlamim, and the carbon Toida, Yarmar parshas nisachim. We should say the psukim that describe the nisachim. What were the nisachim? Well, when you brought a carbon ola, carbon shlamim, a carbon Toida, you brought together with the carbon, you brought a minchas nisachim. You brought an offering that was comprised of flour and wine. So these korbanos were always accompanied by nisachim. Since you're saying the parsha of the korbanos, you should also say the corresponding parsha of the nisachim that were brought with the korbanos. Ki ein zevach b'loy nisachim, because you never brought these korbanos without nisachim. Aval chatos v'osham ein ton nisachim. However, the carbon chatos and the carbon osham, those didn't have nisachim. When you brought a carbon chatos, you didn't bring nisachim with the chatos. So too, when you brought an osham, you didn't bring nisachim together with the osham. So therefore, when you say those parshas, there is no corresponding nisachim to those korbanos. Now it's interesting. The Mechaber did not mention the nisachim. It was left to the Mishnah Berurah to tell us over here that we should mention the parsha of the nisachim. There are those that suggest that maybe the reason the Mechaber doesn't mention the nisachim is that we're not actually required to recite the psukim of the nisachim. Why not? Well, when we mention the korbanos in our tefillah, we're not actually bringing the korbanos. We learned yesterday that there's a limud, Zeis Torah Sachatos. When we learn the Torah of the korbanos, it is as if we get the schus in Shemayim. The Rabbanu Shalom looks at it as if we brought the korbanos. Now, there's a source, we can find a source to this. The Chazal tell us that by the bris bein habesarim, Avram Avinu said to the Rabbanu Shalom, "Bama eda ki irashena." How will I know that I will ultimately, and my children will ultimately inherit Eretz Yisrael? The Chazal tell us that Avram Avinu said, "How do I know that my offspring will always merit to be in your good graces?" Avram Avinu said, maybe the day Chas v'Chalila will come where they will do chatoim like the Dar Mabel and you'll wipe them out. So they had a conversation, and the Rabbanu Shalom said, no, I'm giving Klal Yisrael a gift. I'm going to give them a Beis HaMikdash, and I'm going to give them korbanos. And when they do chatoim, they will have the ability to bring korbanos and gain kapara and gain forgiveness for their averis. So Avram Avinu said, but what will be if there'll be a korban bias? What will be if there won't be a Beis HaMikdash and they won't be able to bring korbanos? So the Rebbeinu Shalom said, don't worry. Zois Torah Sachatas Nishama Parim Svasenu, that the davening, the tefillas of the Klal Yisrael will be accepted like the korbanos, and it is the tefillas that will gain them their kapara instead of the actual physical korbanos. So this discussion took place at the bris bein habesarim. And we know that by the bris bein habesarim, the Rabbanu Shalom instructed Avram Avinu to bring animals and to lay out the animals. It says in the pasuk, the Rabbanu Shalom said, "Vayomer elav kechagli egla mishuleshes." Bring me 3 calves, ve'ez mishuleshes, ve'ayil mishulosh, ve'sar ve'goizal. So the Rabbanu Shalom instructed Avram Avinu to bring all of these animals and then to cut them and to walk through between the pieces, and the amud eish, the shchina, went through between the pieces of the animals, between the sections of the animals, and in this way the Rabbanu Shalom made the bris bein habesarim with Avram Avinu. Now, Rashi tells us that those animals that the Rabbanu Shalom told him to bring were a remez to the korbanos that we would bring in the future. For instance, egla mishuleshes. The Rabbanu Shalom said he should take 3 calves. Zak Rashi, gimel agolim, 3 calves, remez legimel parim. This was a remez to 3 different parim that we bring in the Beis HaMikdash. Par Yom HaKippurim, a par that we bring on Yom Kippur, par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur, a par that we bring if there was a mistake and the tzibur did something wrong, ve'egla arufa. So these are ramazim, and they're ramazim to different korbanos. Now, by the bris bein habesarim, it does not say anything about nisachim. It only mentions the actual animals of the korbanos. It does not mention the nisachim. So since we learn out from the bris bein habesarim that it's our tefillas that could help us instead of the actual korbanos, and over there the nesachim are not mentioned, perhaps there are those who hold that you don't actually have to mention the nesachim when we recite the parshas of the korbanos, but the Mishnah Berurah says that we should recite the nesachim. Ois cotton tesvav, the chatos, we should recite the parsha of the chatos. Ayin b'Magen Avram, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the Magen Avram, Shekasaf, who writes, Dem yodeya shenis chayiv chatos. If somebody is aware that he is actually chayiv to bring a korban chatos, so somebody knows that he was over on an iser for which he would be chayiv kares, chas v'chalila, but he did it b'shoigig. So he was over on an iser krisis b'shoigig. So he knows that he's chayiv a korban chatos. In that case, the Magen Avram says, Yomer Parshas Chatos Koidim. Then when he says korbanos, he should say the parsha of the chatos before he says the parshas of the other korbanos. But but from the words of the other paiskim, the Chavetz Chaim says it is not mashma like that Magen Avram. Now, what's that play over here? Why does the Magen Avram say that if you're chai of a chatos, you should mention the parsha of the chatos first. Well, when we had a Beis HaMikdash, sheibane b'mehera v'yameinu, let's say somebody was chayiv to bring a korban chatos, and he was also chayiv to bring a korban oila. Which one did he bring first? He brought the korban chatos first. Why did he bring the chatos first? Because right now, this person is shuldik, this person is guilty of an avera, and he's guilty of a serious avera. He was over an iser krisus b'shoigeg. So before he could bring a korban oila, which is a gift to the Rabbeinu Shalom, first he has to gain forgiveness from the Rabbeinu Shalom. If he wants to come to the Melech and he wants to give the Melech a gift, you don't give the Melech a gift while you're guilty. First you do what you need to get a kapara. Then you're worthy to come into the Melech Malchei Hamlochim with a korban oila and give him a gift. So first you bring the korban chatos, only then do you bring the korban oila. So therefore, the Magen Avraham suggests that if somebody knows that he's chai v'chatos, he should say the parsha of the chatos first, and only then the oila. However, the Chavetz Chaim says, u'medivrei shari poskim loy mashbekei. Okay, so now let's go to the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch here in Hey and Aleph, and let's go to the words of the Ramah. Says the Ramah, Haggah. We mentioned over here in the Mechaber, in Sif Hey, that there's an inyan to recite the psukim of the Aseres HaDibros. Says the Ramah, V'dafka b'yochid mutar loymar Aseres HaDibros b'chol yom. You're only allowed to recite the Aseres HaDibros on a daily basis as an individual, not as a tzibur. We're not going to have a kriya of the Aseres HaDibros on a daily basis, b'tzibur, with a minyan. Aval aser, it's only b'yachid, aval aser la'omram b'tzibur, it is forbidden to isolate the Aseres HaDibros and make a special kriya of the Aseres HaDibros b'tzibur. That would be aser. Why is this? Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. It says to Mishnah Berurah, hey on base, Eis cut tezayin b'tzibur. We don't say the Aseres HaDibros b'tzibur as its own independent kriya. Obviously, Parshas Yisrael, Parshas Veschanan, we lane the Aseres HaDibros b'tzibur, but we're not going to establish a minig to lane or to have a kriya, a reading of the Aseres HaDibros isolated on a daily basis. Why? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ne'akofrim, this is because of heretics, Sheyomru, who may come to say, Ein Torah elazu. You'll have a kofer who will see that every day they lane, or every day b'tzibur they read the Aseres HaDibros. They'll come and they'll say, why do you think they have a special reading of the Aseres HaDibros every day? Because that's the real Torah. After all, what happened by Maimon Har Sinai? Right? By Maimon Har Sinai, there was a whole revelation. And what happened over there? It was only the Aseres HaDibros. Where did all this other stuff come from? So Kofer Chas v'Chalila will say, Ein Torah elazu. The Iker Torah is the Aseres HaDibros. Everything else, I don't know, the rabbis made it up. Ubefrat bizmanenu. And the Chavetz Chaim says, befrat, specifically in our days. Unfortunately, you have Kofrim who are wont to say such a thing. And therefore, we're not going to give the Aseres HaDibros a special elevated status, b'tzibur, that we're going to read it every day, b'tzibur, because lest people say, oh, the Aseres HaDibros is really the Torah, everything else is some kind of fluff, chas v'shalom. Ulakach, and for the same reason, says the Chavetz Chaim, and kaisvan oisai, we do not write or print the Aseres HaDibros al kuntris hamayuchad l'tzibur. We don't make a sefer of the Aseres HaDibros for the tzibur, because again, we do not want to isolate the Aseres HaDibros and give somehow the Aseres HaDibros a unique position in the tzibur. Yesha Kasu, there are those that write, that it's not usher to say the Aseres HaDibros b'tzibur, ella lekavai bein habrachas. This iser, that you're not allowed to say the Aseres HaDibros b'tzibur on a daily basis, that's only if you really elevate the recitation of the Aseres HaDibros by doing it bein habrachas, by sandwiching it between brachas. What does that mean? Well, let's analyze our davening. We say Baruch Sha'amar, and then we say the Psuke de Zimra, and we close it off with Yishtabach. So Psuke de Zimra is set up so that there's a bracha before Psuke de Zimra and there's a bracha after Psuke de Zimra. So we recite Psuke de Zimra bein habrachas. It's sandwiched by brachas on each end. So too Berachas Kriya Shema. Berachas Kriya Shema, we have brachas that we say before Kriya Shema. We have brachas that we say after Kriya Shema. So again, Kriya Shema was established bein habrachas, between brachas. This shita over here suggests that when is it so that you're not allowed to recite the Aseret HaDibros on a daily basis b'tzibur? That's only if you give it a status similar to Psuke de Zimra and Kriya Shema, where you sandwich it between brachas. Now, what brachas would you sandwich it between? It seems from what the Mishnah Berurah is going to write later, it sounds like what he's coming to say is, do not say the Aseret HaDibros between Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach, so that it's sandwiched between the brachas of Psuke de Zimra. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah inside. Yesh shakosvu. There are those that write, Taloi aser la'amroi b'tzibur. There is no iser, there's no prohibition to recite the Aseret HaDibros on a daily basis b'tzibur, ela l'kavai ben habrachas, unless only if you're going to sandwich it between brachas. K'ma Kriya Shema, similar to Kriya Shema, which has the brachas before Kriya Shema and the brachas after Kriya Shema. Aval koydem Baruch She'amar. But if you have a minhag to say the psukim of the Aseret HaDibros before Baruch She'amar, so you're not sandwiching it between Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach. You're saying it like we say korbanos. Korbanos are before Baruch She'amar. Mutter af b'tzibur. There are those that hold that that's mutter even b'tzibur. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'anan naktinon lesser b'tzibur klal. Klal, we paskin that it's usher to recite the Aseret HaDibros in the context of a tzibur at all, even if it's not sandwiched between the brachas. Ubiyachid, but as far as an individual, dafka shaloi b'saychat tefillah. If he wants to say it, he has to say it not as part of the tefillah. Avalikbaya, shaloi b'saychat tefillah. Avalikbaya b'saychat brachas. But even for a yachid to position the psukim of the Aseret HaDibros bein habrachas, like to say it between Bar Shamar and Yishtabach, like Psuke de Zimra, Gam l'yachid aser, that's aser even for an individual. So again, the Mechaber said that there's an inyan to recite the Aseret HaDibros. The Mishnah Berurah told us that inyan is because we want to mention Maimed Har Sinai every day. That's what the Mishnah Berurah said. The Mishnah Berurah said, Kedei sheyizkar b'chol yom Maimed Har Sinai, so that we should mention Maimed Har Sinai every day, v'yischazik emunasai b'Hashem. And by mentioning Maimed Har Sinai, that will strengthen our emunah. How does that strengthen our emunah? Well, if we mention every day Maimed Har Sinai, where the Ribbono Shel Olam revealed himself by Maimed Har Sinai to millions of people, right? So when this was recorded, when Maimed Har Sinai was recorded, you could make up a lie about something that happened in front of a lot of people if you make it up 1,000 years later. You want to make up a story today that something happened 2,000 years ago, who's going to object? How do they know? There's no way to know. But you can't make up today. You should know 5 hours ago something just happened in front of 3 million people. Everybody look at you like you're a Meshuggah. So when was Maimed Har Sinai recorded? Maimed Har Sinai was recorded then. And people look at it, you have to realize, we have Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos lays out Moshe Kibel Torah B'Sinai, Masar Yeshua, Yeshua L'Zakenim, Zakenim L'Neviim, L'Neviim, Masar L'Anshei Knesset Sagdola, and then we have the Zugos. So we have a very clear transference, a very clear Messiah of the Torah Kedosha recorded to us in the Mishnah that goes from Moshe Rabbeinu to the Gemara, to the Mishnah and to the Gemara. If you look in the Hakdama of the Yad HaChazaka of the Rambam will show you the Messiah of the Torah Kedosha from the time of the Mishnah and Shas and on. Do we have any doubt about the Messiah of the Torah Kedosha from our day back to the Rambam? No, we could open up a Rambam. The Rambam learned the same Torah Kedosha that we did, right? And from the Rambam further back, the Rambam lays it out to you in the Hakdama of the Yad HaChazaka. And from the Siyam HaShas back to the Mishnayos, from the Mishnayos back to the Nevi'im, from the Nevi'im back to Maimed Har Sinai. It's very clear. There's no denying it. So when we mention Maimed Har Sinai every day, that's mechazek our emuna. Now it's kedai to mention over here that when we speak about reciting the Aseres HaDibros, so that we should mention Maimed Har Sinai every day, there's a Torah that I always like to quote. The Torah discusses Birchas HaTorah. And the Torah tells us that in Birchas HaTorah we find, I always keep a siddur here. Where did my siddur run off to? No. Okay, oh, here it is. In Birchas HaTorah, so we have one bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu, lasoik b'divrei Torah. Well, that bracha is a classic Birchas HaMitzvos, right? We make a Birchas HaMitzvos on Megillah. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu, on Mikra Megillah. We make a Birchas HaMitzvos, Lishmaya Kol Shofar. We make a Leisha Basukah. These are all classic Birchas HaMitzvos. So this is also Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu, lasoik b'divrei Torah. Then we continue with a tefillah. The Harav Na Hashem Elokeinu divrei Sarasach Abifinu. The Rebbe Shalom should make the Torah sweet to us and to our offspring and to future generations. Baruch atah Hashem Amalai B'Torah L'Am Yisrael. Okay. Then we have another bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. Gebenched is the Rebbeinu Shalom, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, who chose us from all the nations. V'nasan lanu es Torasai, and gave us his Torah. Baruch atah Hashem noisen HaTorah. What is that bracha? What is that bracha? Is that a Birchas HaMitzvos? It doesn't sound like a classic Birchas HaMitzvos. And we already said Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu, lasik b'divrei Torah. Says the Torah, the bracha of Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim is a Birchas Hoidah. It's a thank you bracha. What's it thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom for? Maimed Har Sinai. Every day we thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for Maimed Har Sinai, the gift of Maimed Har Sinai. What's the gift of Maimed Har Sinai? Well, first of all, it's like we just mentioned before. It is the linchpin, one of the linchpins of our emunah in the Rebbeinu Shalom. The fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom revealed himself by Maimed Har Sinai to God's Klal Yisrael. And Chazal, of course, say that all of our neshamas were there. That's a tremendous gift that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us. But I think that when we thank the Rebbeinu Shalom on a daily basis for Maimed Har Sinai, there's another machshava that we have to have. And that is, it's a shtickle bracha, Shala Yasani Goy. We make every day a bracha to the Rebbeinu Shalom on Maimed Har Sinai, that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a gift, Ki lekach toiv, nasati lachem tarasi al tazevu. The Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a Torah HaKadoshah that imbues our life with purpose and with meaning and with success. If we live according to the dictates of the Torah HaKadoshah, you live a beautiful life. So yeah, we thank the Rebbeinu Shalom every day. Look at the world without a Torah. Go, look out in the street. Look at the people who don't have a Torah HaKadoshah. Look what they look like. Forget anything else. Even just look what they look like. So yes, we make a bracha every day on Maimed Har Sinai. Okay, weiter. How did my page get turned over there? Okay. So again, the Mechaber told us that we say the Aseres HaDibros to mention Maimed Har Sinai every day. The Ramah said that it's only a Yochid that should say the Aseres HaDibros every day, but for the Tzibur to have a reading of the Aseres HaDibros B'Tzibur every day, that we said is Aser. The Mishnah Berurah said there are those that say that it's only Aser if you karveya it bein habrachas, if you sandwich it between the brachas, that elevates it to a position where it could already become problematic because of kaifrim. We paskin that the tzibur doesn't recite the Aseres HaDibros on a daily basis, even if it's not bein habrachas, but a yachid who's gonna say it on a daily basis should make sure that he does not do it bein habrachas. He could do it on a daily basis, but not bein habrachas. Okay, now we go to Sivav. Top line, Hayam Beis, in the Shulchan Aruch says the Makabel. Parshiyos HaKorbanos, when we do read the parshas of the korbanos, lo yomar ela b'yom, we should only recite them by day. V'ayla kaman sivin mem zayin sif yud gimel, where this is discussed in greater detail, says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting vav, is cutting yud zayin b'yom. We should only recite the parshas of the korbanos by day. Why is that? Then the korbanos craven ela b'yom, because korbanos are brought during the day. All of these korbanos have to be brought between the bringing of the tamid shel shachar, the morning carbon tamid, and the bringing of the tamid shel bein arabayim. So all the korbanos are brought during the day. So it's only appropriate to say the parshas of the korbanos by day. Aval parshas hakiyar. If you want to say the parsha of the kiyar, that's what they washed. The kehanim washed their hands before the avodah from the kiyar that was located outside of the heichal near the mizbeach. We just learned that parshas kisisa. Parshas trumas hadeshen. Or you want to say the psukim of the trumas hadeshen, where a kohen would come every morning, remove some ash from the mizbeach. There's an avodah of the trumas hadeshen. You're allowed to say those before daybreak, because those avodas were done before daybreak. So you could say those parshas then. V'im ein loy penai. Let's say somebody does not have time to recite the parshas of the korbanos by day. Parshas of korbanos balayla. You could actually say the parshas of the korbanos at night also. Again, because we're not actually doing the avodah. Another reason why you're allowed to say the parshas by night, I believe. I'm not sure, so I'm not going to say it. Okay. Weiter. Vim tzarech amida. Says the Chavetz Chaim, do you have to stand when you say the parsha of the korbanos? After all, the kohen had to stand when he did the avodah. Vim tzarech amida, ayin b'siman mem ches, b'mishnah berurah sif katan aleph, where it will be discussed. There are those that say that you don't have to stand, because do you have to be a kohen to say the parshas of the korbanos? No, because I am Am Yisrael. I'm not saying the parsha of the korbanos as if I'm a kohen doing the avodah. I'm saying it as if I'm the baal, the owner of the carbon. The owner of the carbon is allowed to sit while his carbon is being brought. He's not doing the avodah. So you don't necessarily need amida when you say the parsha of the korbanos. Kasa b'shla. The Shla writes, the b'shabbos v'yomtiv, lo yomar yihi rotzen. We have in the Siddur, it's printed different yihi rotzons after the recitation of the parshas of the korbanos, where we asked the Rabbeinu Shalom, yihi rotzon milfanecha, it should be as if we brought the korbanos. Says the Shla that on Shabbos and Yom Tov we should not say the yihi rotzon, dein carbon dedava babahem, because these yihi rotzons are by the korbanos, like the oila, like the shlamim. Those are korbanos dedava. Those are korbanos that you bring as an offering, as a voluntary offering, not because you're chayiv to bring them. Korbanos of that sort are not brought on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So it's not appropriate to say Yehi Ratzon on those korbanos at Shabbos and Yom Tov. Avala Parshiyas and Hefsed La'imran Kikar B'Torah. But there's nothing wrong with reciting the psukim that have to do with korbanos. So you say psukim for the Torah Kedusha. When we come up in who ben Torah, person is a ben Torah, mutav yoseh sheyasik b'parsha diyomi. You know what? Instead of saying the parsha of the oila, the parsha of the shlamim on Shabbos and Yom Tov, when you're not going to bring an oila and a shlamim, and the schus that you're getting is only kikara b'Torah, better learn the parsha Chumash and Rashi that week's parsha. Mishahu avel lo yomer parshas korbanos. Also, the Shla says that an avel should not recite the parshas of the korbanos. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is that an avel didn't bring a carbon nadav. Okay, Siv Zayin. Kishe Yisayim parshas ha'oila, after you recite the psukim of the oila, Yarma Yehi Ratzon Melfanecha Sheyehezeh Chashuv U'Makubal Ki'ilu Hikrafti Oila. This is the Yehiratzen that the Mishnah Berurah is just referring to. We say a Yehiratzen, it should be your will, and it should be pleasant, milfanecha, before you, Rabbeinu Shalom. Sheyiyazeh choshuv, that the recitation that I just made should be choshuv, it should be valued, umekubal, and it should be accepted, kilu ikrafti oila, as if I brought a korban oila. V'kach yomer akar parshas hamincha v'ashlamim. And you should make such a yehiratzen, you should recite such a yehiratzen after you recite the parsha of the korban mincha, the parsha of the korban shlamim. Mipnei sheheim ba'im nidava. It's appropriate to say yehiratzens by these korbanos because they could be brought as voluntary offerings. But it would not be appropriate to make such a yehiratzen when you mention a korban chatos, because a korban chatos does not come voluntarily. You only bring a korban chatos if you're chayiv a korban chatos. So what are you going to do? You're going to come to the Rebbeinu Shalom and say yehiratzen as if I brought a korban chatos. You don't bring a korban chatos b'nedava. Are you chayiv a korban chatos? Now let's say you are chayiv a korban chatos. Should you say the yehiratzen? Let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut Zion, cut Yudches, Boim Nedava. Avalaka Parshas Hakatos, but after the recitation of the Parsha of the Korban Chatos, Lo Yarmakein, you don't say a Yehiratzen, it's not appropriate. Levi She'ena Ba Nedava, because it can't come. You can't bring a Korban Chatos as a voluntary offering. Ela Imkein Avar Avera Shechayav Malach Chatos. You could only bring a Korban Chatos if you tackle over such an Avera and you're Chayav Chatos. The Chein Asham, so to a Korban Asham that's brought on 5 different Chatoim. You only bring the Asham if you did one of those Chatoim. You don't bring it B'nedava. The Asham Talui, also an Asham Talui. An Asham Talui is a specific type of korban Asham that you bring on a suffix of an Avera. You had Chalev, you had different fats in front of you, and there's a suffix whether or not you ate Chalev. We're not sure if you ate Chalev. So under certain conditions, you bring a korban Asham Talui. It's Talui, it's hanging. It's we're not certain if you're chayiv the whether you need a kapara or not. So you bring an asham talui. But again, kaivalon de'ena ba b'nedava. The asham and the asham talui don't come b'nedava. They only come if you're chayiv. So it's inappropriate to say yehiratzen. That makes it sound as if you're bringing it as a voluntary offering. V'achreinim kasu b'shem marshal the yesh leimer af la'achar chatzis v'asham yehiratzen. There are those that suggest that no, you can say yehiratzen after the parsha of the chatzis and the asham as well. Rak sheyerba b'loshet suffix. But you should make the yehiratzen as a suffix. What does that mean? You should say yehiratzen milfanecha im avarti avera shechayav malach chatos. If I was over an avera that makes me chayav chatos, sheyeh zeh nechshav ki'ilu krafti chatos. Then this amira, this recitation of the parsha of the chatos, should stand as if I brought a korban chatos. V'im lav, and if not, if I'm not chayav chatos, yeh k'kara b'Torah, then it should be as if I'm just saying psukim from the Torah. I'm learning Torah. And this type of yehiratzen with a suffix, you could say such a yehiratzen in the korban asham also. Hamagen Avram hiksha oid. However, the Magen Avram is not even happy with this idea. So again, we said so far, on the korbanos that you could bring b'nedava as voluntary offerings, it's appropriate to say yehiratzen. On the korbanos that you cannot bring voluntarily, you could only bring them if you're chayiv, it doesn't seem to be appropriate to make such a yehiratzen. However, we said, there are those that say, right, Yachreinu b'shem Rashal, they say, you could make a yehiratzen, just you have to say the yehiratzen with a suffix. It's yehiratzen if I'm chayiv chatos, then this recitation should be as if I brought a chatos. If I'm not chayiv chatos, it should be k'kayrei b'Torah. Now the Magen Avram says, nope, I'm not happy with that either. Says the Magen Avram, Magen Avram hiksha oid, eich yoymar nischayavti chatos. How could you say that the amira should stand in the place of me bringing a chatos if I'm chayav chatos? What does that mean? That means I don't know if I'm chayav chatos. If I'm chayav chatos, then this amira should stand for me as if I brought a chatos. Says the Magen Avram, that doesn't work. Hakaimallah in chatos, by a chatos we paskin the boi yedia betchila shechata. In order to bring a korban chatos and get a kapara from the bringing of that korban chatos, camera, focus. in order to bring a karbachatas and gain a kapara from bringing that karbachatas, it has to be that you know you did the avera and you know you're chayiv. So if somebody comes to the Beis Hamikdash with a beautiful karbachatas and he says, I want to bring a karbachatas ala safek, I'm not 100% sure. I'm afraid maybe I was over on Isikrisis Peshagig. No such thing. You can't bring a karbachatas that way. So what are you going to do? The amira of the parsha of the chatas is supposed to be as if you're bringing a karbachatas. So you can't bring a karbachatas in that scenario. So you can't make an amira under that scenario either. You're going to say, Yihiratzon, if I did such an avera and I'm chayav chatas, then it should be like a chatas. You can't bring a karbachatas that way. So the amira won't work that way either, says the Magen Avram. Okay, therefore, Hela Magen Avram, the Magen Avram rules the Inyan Chatas, that when it comes to a karbachatas, La Yoma Klal HaYihiratzon, you should not recite Yihiratzon in the context of the karbachatas. Rak Linyan Asham Vadai V'Asham Taloi Yuchal Loima Yihiratzon Zelda Al Tanai. By an Asham, whether it's an Asham Vadai or an Asham Taloi, you could say Yihiratzon Ala Safek. This is based on a Machlekes Rishonim, whether or not a karban Asham could be brought Mitach Safek. Could be that a karban asham could be brought mitach safek, and therefore you could say yihiratzon with a safek. Ach im libay noikvay shema avar alchet. Now, how about if somebody's worried that maybe he was over on an isikrisis b'shaygig and he's chayav and v'haya lo yediyah shechata, he's worried that once upon a time he knew that he was over such an avera and he's chayav v'shachach, and then he forgot. So this guy's walking around and he's saying, I can't be at peace with myself. Why? Because I'm afraid maybe 15 years ago, I knew that I was over on Isikrisis B'Shoigeg and that I was chayiv v'chatos, and I forgot. So maybe I really am chayiv to bring karbachatos. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah, Yuchal Loimer Gam Kena Yiratzon Achachatos B'derech T'nai. Okay. Sif Ches, says the Mechaber. Yomer ima korbanos pasuk v'shakat oisay al yarech hamizbech tzafayna l'ftei Hashem. The Mechaber tells us that when you say the korbanos, you should mention this pasuk. V'shakat oisay, you should shech the korban al yarech hamizbech tzafayna, on the northern side of the mizbech l'ftei Hashem, before Hashem. You should say that pasuk. Why? Says the Mishmaris Kat Yotes. Nowadays we do recite this pasuk when? Right after the parsha of the Karban Tamid. We say this pasuk. Why do we say this pasuk? There's a medrash, because it's brought down in the medrash. Whoever mentions this pasuk, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zeicher HaKedes Yitzchak, it spurs the Rabbeinu Shalom to remember the Akedah. How is this pasuk a remez to the Akedah? So one thing that's brought down is that the word tzafayna has in it the shirish tzafun. Now tzafun, what do you think of when you think of tzafun? You think of the afikomen. What do we do with the afikomen? We hide the afikomen. Tzafun means hidden, that which is hidden. So v'shakat oisay yarech hamizbech tzafayna is a remez to the schus of the Akedah, and the schus avos, which is tzafun, it's hidden away for us. The Satan can't touch it. It's hidden away for us, l'doirei doiros. So when we say v'shakat oisay al yarech hamizbech tzafayna, it's a remez to the schus of the Akedah. Yesh noihagin, sif tes, in the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber. Yesh noihagin, there are those that have the minig loymar to say Parshas HaKiyar, the parsha from Kisisa that discusses the construction of the kiyar from which the Kehanim would wash their hands and feet before they did the avodah. V'achakach Parshas Trumas Hadeshen, and then the pasuk from Parshas Sav that mentions the Trumas Hadeshen, the avodah whereby the Kohen would come, remove some ash from the Mizbeach. V'achakach Parshas HaTamid, and then the parsha of the two Tmidin. V'achakach Parshas Mizbeach Miktar Ketores, and then the parsha of the Ketores, or Parshas Samane HaKetores, the spices of the Ketores, V'asiyasai, and the manner in which they were made. This sif has no Mishnah Berurah. Now we have a few minutes left here. So I want to just take a couple of minutes and go back to something that we learned yesterday. And that is, we learned yesterday the inyan of reciting the Parshas Haman. And on Hey Amid Aleph in Mishnah Berurah Ois Kat Yud Gimel, the Chavetz Chaim told us, Parshas Haman, why do we recite the Parsha of the Mon? Kedei sheyamin, so that we should believe shekam zaynoisav ba'in ba'hashkacha pratis, that all of our parnassah, all of our mezainis comes b'hashkacha pratis. What does hashkacha pratis mean? It means that the Rabbeinu Shalom is mashkiach. The Rabbeinu Shalom watches and pays attention pratis on every prat uprat, on every detail. And that's how we get our mezainis. That's how we get our parnassah. Ukidiksiva, like it says in the Parsha of the Mon, Hamarbe loy hedif, the marbe did not collect more mon, v'hamamit loy hechser. The mamit, the one who went out to collect less, didn't get any less mon. Lahoyrais, to teach she'ein riboy ha'hishtadlis b'il ma'uma, that increasing your level of hishtadlis does not accomplish anything. What does the Torah Kedosha say in Parshas Beshalach by the Mon? Parshas Beshalach, it tells us, Zadavar Ashet Tziva Hashem. This is what was commanded by the Rabbeinu Shalom. Liktu mimenu, collect from the mon, ish lefi achloi. Each person according to the needs of the eating of his house, the needs of his household. Oimer lagul goylis. They should pick an oimer. They should collect an oimer. Zakt Rashi. What's an oimer? Rashi says oimer shem mida. It's the name of a measurement. A pound, a cup. So it's as if the Rabbeinu Shalom said, go out and pick a cup, lagul goylis, for each person that lives in your house. Mispar nafshei seichem, according to the number of people in your household. Ish la'asher ba'ahaloi tikachu. So the Rabbeinu Shalom commanded them to collect a certain measure of mon per person. Says the pasuk, Vayasik came in Israel. That's what they did. Vayilketu, and they collected hamarbe, some collected more, v'hamamit, and one who collected less. Wait, what does that mean? If the Rabbeinu Shalom said go out and collect a cup for each person, and the pasuk says Vayasik came in Israel, the Bnei Yisrael did that, so shouldn't that mean that each one went out and collected a cup per person? So the Rabbeinu Shalom said collect an oimer per person. And the pasuk says Vayasik came in Israel. That's what they did. So what do you mean a marbe and a mamit? Why is there a marbe and why is there a mamit? It almost sounds like they were mezidim. They were not listening to what the Rabbeinu Shalom said. The Rabbeinu Shalom said collect an oimer, and there was a marbe who went out and tried to collect more than an oimer. And then there was a mamit. There was somebody who went out and tried to collect less than an oimer. But how could that be? The pasuk says Vayasim chen b'nei Yisrael. Vayasim chen b'nei Yisrael means that they listened to what the Rabbeinu Shalom said. And the Rabbeinu Shalom said, oimer lagul goylis. Then the next pasuk says, Vayamoidu ba'oimer. And then they measured it against an oimer. Ooh, okay. And what happened? V'loi hedef hamarbe. Turns out the marbe didn't have any more. V'hamamit loi hechser. And the mamit didn't have any less. Ish lefi akloi lakatu. They each collected the exact amount that they needed according to the number of people in their household. What's going on here? Who's the marbe? Who's the mamit? What's happened? So what you have to say is that they didn't have, or at least it wasn't common, to have an oimer collection device. They did not have a cup that was the measurement of an oimer, whereby they were able to go out, collect an oimer. If they did, then there would not have been a marbe and a mamit. Everybody would have gone out. Guy would have said, I have 6 people in my house, so I need 6 Oimrim. So he would have gone out with his Oimer cup. Okay, 1 Oimer, pour it into a pot. 2 Oimer, pour it into a pot. 3 Oimer, pour it into a pot. Until he had 6. If they had an Oimer measure, and they Badafka tried to collect more, or they Badafka tried to collect less, then they would be Balei Avla. That would have been an Avla, Gedola. They would have been Rishayim if they did that. So obviously they didn't have it. Whatever the story was, maybe there were only a few people who had these Omer measures. Maybe it wasn't movable for whatever reason. I don't know. But clearly they did not have such a measuring cup that they could use to go out and collect with. But the Rebbeinu Shalom said, pick an Omer like a goylus. So what do I do? How do I know that I'm collecting an Omer? So it's very simple. What you do is, you say, what did the Rebbeinu Shalom say? The Rebbeinu Shalom said I should pick an Omer like a goylus. That means that an Omer is what we need per person. Okay, maybe they also had an understanding visually where they were able to approximate an Omer. But when it comes to approximation, there are 2 different types of people. And when it comes to how needy people feel, there are 2 different types of people. There's a marbe and there's a mamet. When you give out food, go to a smorgasbord. One guy goes and heaps up his plate, right? People eat with their eyes. One guy goes and he heaps up his plate. He thinks that's what he needs. He's the marbe. Then there's a mamet. Mamet says, what do I need already? He takes a couple of pieces. He walks away. There's one guy, you tell him, listen, you got to fill up a cup. Guy puts it, how much is a cup? Is that a cup? Yeah, I probably should add a little more. That a cup? This is going to be enough for one person? Hard to imagine. Add a little more. So he's a marbe. Then there's another fellow who's a mamet. He goes, Moshe Rabbeinu said, I need a cup. Is that a cup? That's probably a cup. Somebody says, what, you think that's enough for a person? Yeah, why not? So he's a mamet. Then they came home, and they had a neighbor who had an Omer measure. Well, somebody had an Omer measure. And then they went and they said, let's see, did I could get an Omer? They poured it in. Guess what? It was an Omer. The marbe got an Omer. The mamet got an Omer. The lesson from here is a very important lesson. People struggle all the time. How much ishtadlus do they have to make for parnassah? The answer, Rabbi say, very often is, really depends how much emunah and betachon you have and what you think your needs are. Are you a marbe or are you a mamet? The bottom line is, if you're a marbe, indeed you might have to make more ishtadlus. How much ishtadlus do you feel you need to make? If you think that you're not making enough ishtadlus to have parnassah, well then the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't give you parnassah b'neis. That's the klala of Adam Arishan. You have to work for your parnassah. But if you're a mamet and you really believe, listen, I have enough ishtadlus here to be able to have a parnassah, so then okay. So then you made enough ishtadlus that the Rebbeinu Shalom could give you parnassah. It's not an ace. Better to be a mamet than it is to be a marbe. But it really is, to a large extent, up to you. Are you a marbe or are you a mamet? And that, in turn, is going to be based very much on how much emunah and betachon you have. Do you taka realize the Rebbeinu Shalom could give me what he wants? I don't have to spend 8 hours on the phone trying to make deals. The Rebbeinu Shalom could give me the deal on the first phone call. So why do I have to spend 8 hours making phone calls? The Rebbeinu Shalom didn't give it to me. Okay, he didn't want to give it to me. But he's not going to give it to me if I make 20 more phone calls. I made enough ishtadlus today. I can sit down now and learn the daf. I don't have to make more ishtadlus. And remember that at the end of the day, the marbe is not going to get more. The mamet's not going to get less. That's a very important lesson that we learn out from the month. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. The schools of Limud HaTorah should be begging against Klal Yisrael. The Rambam should send Yeshua for us, parnassah, to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the BS God tzedek, but Yameinu, Amen. Be well.